So welcome everyone, good afternoon. It's an honor to be with you here today. I am Mike Gallagher, the CEO of the Entertainment Software Association, which is the organization that represents the video game industry around the country, puts on our trade show E3 every year, headquartered here in Washington. And for some of you, it makes perfect sense that you would have somebody from the video game industry here to moderate this panel. And for those that don't, we have a very short video that is high energy and should help lift everybody right after returning from lunch. So if we could hit the video.
It's young people like you that make me so confident that America's best days are still to come.
I live in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm a seventh grade.
I'm Emma Phillip. I'm Maddie LaPrinza. And I'm Chloe Mario. And we're from Stewart Country Day School in Princeton, New Jersey.
Aside from programming and design games, I like to play chess, lacrosse, and computer.
I also enjoy creating pieces of art.
The main way I found out about this competition was through my mother.
I'd already been working on Path Fiction Wars for a long time. One of the librarians at my school told me that I was working on a scientific educational game. And it turned out to be the perfect competition for me to enter in.
It's bringing kids together who are excited about the development of video games. Something they can make a real career out of is very exciting.
Gaming is a great way to convey that type of learning to children who maybe wouldn't necessarily respond to STEM in more traditional settings.
I designed this game for young people to learn multiplication and division in a fun way.
The character moves around by manipulating the attractive and repulsive forces in the outer.
Oh, no, cute fish.
The way we learned inequalities when we were younger was that a shark found and the shark wanted to eat the larger number. Ah! So that's what we designed our game after.
Yay! I'm smarter than a first grader.
Most of my games I don't have goals. All my games are just for me to learn.
It's just natural learning. It's going to happen in the course of following something you're interested in, which is really the best way to learn.
I guess I had the idea of a bothering who had to get through a recycling plant, but everybody pitched in.
Connor came up with the idea for the game. We got the idea of putting Justin in there because we've seen him draw stuff.
As a parent, I know seeing your kids do extraordinary things brings the greatest happiness that a parent can have.
My family tested my game, gave me feedback.
My little brother was my game tester. He supported me and played and tested my entire game.
Our teacher, Miss Testa, approached us and told us that she saw a lot of potential in the shark idea.
I think it was a really new experience for all of us because we never ventured out into doing something like that.
I think I'll take some more computer programming classes in high school, but I actually find it really interesting now that I tried it.
I'm very interested in being a writer.
In the future, I'd like to own my own game company.
I will probably pursue a job in computer science, engineering, or theoretical physics.
When you work and study and excel in what you're doing in math and science, we're making sure we have the best, smartest, most skilled workers in the world.
So thank you for your attention to that video. It just shows just a little bit of the energy that our industry has when it comes to appealing to youth and the magnetic appeal it can have when it comes to the area of STEM. And it's a great commitment that we have as an industry to seeing more STEM graduates, because frankly we need them employed in our industry and driving us forward to the next generation of entertainment, just like you see other employers here at the U.S. News and World Report Conference who are doing the same. So it's exciting to be here with you, and we have a wonderful panel, a very distinguished, accomplished, experienced, and highly decorated panel. I will introduce each of the panelists, and then we're going to go right to questions. I would ask that you hold your questions for the first, say, 15 to 30 minutes. Then I'll pause, we'll take questions from the audience, and I've got several others in reserve if there's not enough energy in the room to drive that discussion. So we'll start first with Peg Cagle, who is on my left. Peg serves on the board of directors of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, which helps teachers provide the highest quality mathematics instruction and professional development, research, and other resources. She's a speaker at several of the organization's national conferences for the last decade. She is an adjunct faculty member in the Peabody College of Education, which is in Vanderbilt. And she previously was a middle school mathematics teacher in the LA Unified School District. She was served as an Einstein Fellow in Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's office here in Washington, D.C. in 2011 and 12. She was selected as the LA County Teacher of the Year in 2008. And she's also won a Presidential Award for Excellence in Science and Mathematics Teaching in 2005. So welcome, Peg. And next on my left, to Peg's left, is Chelsea. Chelsea, get these in the right order here. Chelsea Cochran is a teacher in residence at Sally Ride Science, a company founded by Dr. Sally Ride that creates products and programs to support and sustain student interest in STEM. She also helped to establish and is a faculty member with Sally Ride Online Academy. She also works in the Instructional Support Services Department in the San Diego Unified School District. She previously was an elementary science resource teacher for San Diego Unified School District. And welcome to Chelsea. And then to Chelsea's left is Linda Gojak. And she is the immediate past president of the NCTM, that's the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. She previously was served as director of the Center for Mathematics and Science Education, Teaching and Technology at Joan Carroll University. Prior to that, she was an elementary and middle school math teacher for 28 years. So lots of on-the-job experience here on this panel. And she's also won a Presidential Award for Excellence in Science and Mathematics teaching in 1991. So welcome. And finally, at the opposite end of the table, we have Chad Ripberger. Chad currently is the 4-H agent and county extension department head for Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Mercer County in Trenton, New Jersey. In this role, he's spearheaded several 4-H partnerships and initiatives with groups like the Boys and Girls Clubs, City of Trenton, Education Works, New Jersey Youth Corps of Trenton, and the YMCA. Through his involvement with the Education Development Center, he also leads New Jersey's involvement in the National Partnerships for After-School After-School Science Project, a program that trains after-school program staff to teach students engaging science and engineering concepts. So we have the school day extended into the after-school environment with Chad's participation here today. And he's also won the Northeast Regional Award for Excellence in Extension at the 123rd Annual Meeting of the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities in 2010. So welcome, Chad. Go to Linda. And Linda, experts suggest that building a child's interest in STEM should start very early because students typically decide in middle school that STEM is or is not for them. What are the best strategies for piquing student interest in STEM at an early age?
And so I would first of all say that middle school is probably too late. So the earlier we can do it, even as early as primary school, is critical, and that means we have to take a look, particularly how we teach science and mathematics to young children, that both of them should be very very conceptually based experiences, connected wherever possible, so that math doesn't appear to be the young children strictly computation, learning how to do something, memorizing procedures, And the more that we can connect what students are developing and understanding in mathematics to what they're doing in science, hands-on science, inquiry-based science for young children, I think the more that kids will be excited about doing mathematics and science, and we won't have to undo a lot of those early misconceptions that kids have about those two subject areas.
Other panelists on that question? How do we make sure we're piquing their interest at an early age?
Well, I would just like to add from the informal science education perspective, out of school time, after school, that there's a growing awareness and appreciation for what can be done outside of the school day, outside of the walls of the school building. And the After School Alliance recently did a study looking at what is our role in science education, and a big part of it is interest and engagement. And I too agree that middle school is too late. You know, kids are born as scientists, they're born as engineers. Anyone that's been around a young child knows that. And I think that's one of the great things about children is they are prepackaged with this amazing curiosity for everything around them, both the natural world and the constructive world. And it's really our job to figure out a way to nurture that and to keep them engaged and to help grow and develop that. So I think that's where, you know, after school and out of school time programs and other youth organizations and science centers and museums and things of that nature can really play a big role. Some kids are fortunate that their strategy is that they have parents that help nurture that at home. And that's, you know, we know that those kids really greatly benefit from that and have a huge advantage. But for those kids that don't have that nurtured at home, then I think that's where out of school can really help. And you know, with out of school, there's a lot of room for creativity and for project-based learning and learning through experiences. And so that's one of the things that we want to be able to do. Plus, we all know that kids spend a lot more time outside of school than they do in school. And so as far as weekends and Saturday programs and summer programs and camps and things of that nature, that's what we're trying to do.
Other thoughts?
I think another really important or critical piece, I would say, is reframing what success means within these disciplines, certainly starting from early ages. I will focus on math because that is my area of expertise. There are way too many children who have very, very sort of binary view of mathematics. Either you get it or you don't. Either it's right or it's wrong. And unfortunately, we know that that comes through a lot of the instruction and the ways that they're being trained to think mathematics is. And unless we really do the job of reframing what success means in math around things other than computation at speed, I don't think that we're going to succeed in gaining traction on this idea. And I think it's very doable, but I think we have to be very intentional about that. Math should be seen as just as rich of an environment for mucking about as, you know, a playground is, as a sandbox is. We need to frame that differently because we're not getting kids where we need to. And I certainly think that the fact that, you know, we started out by looking at video games, kids don't attach the same significance to failure. What failure means in a video game is information to move forward and be more successful the next time. And unfortunately, they don't necessarily frame failure that same way in particular within mathematics, and they need to.
And don't you think that's also true of parents, that parents give them this notion that the goal in math is to get the right answer? And when they fail, there's something, you know, that's not a good thing. So I think that even begins at home before kids even enter school. So it's also educating parents about that.
Just to wrap up this question, to bring in information about science, I think that keeping students interested in the STEM fields in middle school is really the challenge. Like Chad mentioned, young kids are interested in figuring out how the world works around them. And something between, even in fourth grade, when students are asked, 2/3 of students self-report that they like science and math in fourth grade. And when those same students are asked in 8th grade, the statistics go way down. So something happens between fourth grade and 8th grade. So helping it stick in middle school is really important by, as our kids are making decisions about what they want to do when they grow up. That's kind of, middle school is the first time where we start to talk to them about career paths and showing them that the mucking about with math and science that they loved and enjoyed as little kids can lead to a career is important. I think middle school teachers could do their part by making sure that hands-on learning that has been mentioned continues through middle school, and math and science doesn't just become a textbook opportunity for students in school.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation Peggy had about the video game aspect, that failing is part of it. And it's like, do it again. Can I try again, try again, try again? If we could take that same attitude and adapt it to math or some of the more difficult science studies, that would be terrific. Well, on a related note, just looking at the other side of the prism, in a December editorial, the New York Times argued that one of the biggest reasons why students lose interest in STEM after middle school is because most schools teach math and science in a way that appeals only to the most fervent students. How can teachers make STEM projects available to all students, not just the AP scholars and the highly motivated kids that are already succeeding? And Peg, let's start with you on that question.
Well, there are huge opportunities actually within the new standards, which are being adopted many, many places, and hopefully are going to gain sufficient traction that even when they're not technically adopted, they're still going to start to reshape what we're doing in schools. There have always been rich opportunities, but it's very hard in the current testing environment for teachers to be courageous enough. And unfortunately, that is one of the situations that we're being placed in right now in schools, is to really press back on ideas about what should be paid attention to and what should be valued. And when we talk about things like you're proposing here, it really does require us to let go of a little bit the control in our rooms, because the gain in student learning eventually is going to be phenomenal, but it may not show up in a 3-month time frame. It may not show up by this testing cycle. And if teachers are constrained by that kind of thinking, and right now they're not just constrained, they're actually being fired, hired, etc., based on test scores, I think that we're going to continue to see what we're seeing. If we test what we value what we test. And right now, that's driving us away from the idea of providing opportunities. The kids who are getting to the really rich classes, who are getting into the APs, who are getting into the really rich after school or other activities, are very often parents who find ways of opting them out, or don't worry about that stuff, or pull them out and put them into independent programs. But for, unfortunately, a large part of our population, including most of our at-risk students, most of our low SES students, most of our students of color, they're not in those settings. They're in places where the school is very much driven and constrained in their thinking by test scores. And certainly in mathematics, it has been the death knell, I think, of really creative thinking in the mathematics classroom, except for people who are really, really brave and soldier on and do what they think is going to be best for students. So.
Other thoughts about how we extend the benefits of the excitement around STEM to not just the brightest bulbs, the ones that get it right away?
I'll address that a little bit from an equity perspective. I'm very concerned about when we see that kids might have an aptitude for mathematics, the goal is to push them into the next course. And if all 8th graders are taking algebra and my kid's smart, that means my kid better be taking algebra as a 7th grader or a 6th grader. And I want to go back to Peg's earlier comment about giving kids an opportunity to just get messy with math and messy with science and not worry about putting them on a track so they're in this course way ahead of everybody else, but really thinking of it more as an equity issue where all kids get a chance to just be what you mentioned before about curious about doing mathematics, and how does this work in not just from a textbook situation or a problem that my teacher gives me, but really in a real life context, which is usually science or engineering. So I think this notion, we need to move away from this idea of pushing kids through hoops, and because you're smarter than I am, you get to take this course ahead of me. Or getting all of these college credits before I graduate from high school. I have to sometimes wonder, what's the point? And I also have to wonder about the importance of the maturation level of kids. If they're really understanding it to the depth, if they have the maturity of understanding it to the depth to really be able to apply it and use it. I will share kind of a funny example that I remember from my student teaching, which was a long time ago. I started out as a 5th grade self-contained classroom teacher. I love teaching math, not so much reading. Probably why I wound up where I am. But I remember as a student teacher, we learned to do something called a Fry readability scale. Some of you might be familiar with that. And we took the book Gone with the Wind and we did a readability on it. Now, I'm going to have you all guess what grade level Gone with the Wind is written in. 5th grade. It is a 5th, on the Fry readability scale, you take an excerpt from Gone with the Wind and you put it through the scale, it is 5th grade. That does not mean that you hand that book to 5th graders to have them read it. And I think the same thing is true about mathematics. I've never forgotten that just because a kid can go through all the computational moves, does that mean that they're ready as an 11 or 12-year-old to take Algebra 1? And I think we do kids a real disservice at all levels by pushing them through courses rather than letting them really gain a love for the beauty and joy of doing mathematics and doing science.
I think part of your question too was focused on the fact that historically schools have been designed to favor a certain type of learner and a certain personality type for that matter. And I think oftentimes with our after-school programs, and I was just talking to someone 2 days ago, one of our after-school science club leaders, she was talking about that group of girls that have been somewhat disinterested in STEM during the school day, and then when she has them in the STEM club where it's all hands-on and experiential, and the kids are exploring and getting messy, and they're really acting on their own curiosity, everything changes. They're totally engaged, they're having fun, and I mean, we find that consistently in a lot of our 4-H programs across the country. We have lots of projects where we ask the 4-H educator, as part of the reporting, to let us know, tell us a success story. And more often than not, they talk about that group of kids that they're disengaged during the school day, but then when they have this different style of learning presented to them, they're totally hooked. So I think that's a big part of what you're talking about. I think there's a lot of innovative schools that have kind of flipped that around and are doing this. It's not across the board, but I also think that once again, that's an area where out-of-school time can really help with interest and engagement and letting kids build confidence that they can do STEM and that it can be for them.
Chelsea, good. Go ahead. Well, I'll just add my personal anecdote. I have 3 kids, 22, 20, and 18, and they're all products of the Northern Virginia schools here. And the advice I give younger parents is pay close attention to the standardized math test they take in 5th grade, because that determines everything. And so much of it is driven, the current system. I'm giving you a perspective back from the other way. My older daughter is an engineer. She graduated from the University of Texas last year. My younger one's about to start engineering school out on the West Coast. And so they're both very STEM focused, but it all goes back to this 5th grade math test. And if you get below it, you're put in a different track and you're not allowed. So the fun isn't there at any stage. It's all about hitting the numbers so you can graduate, already have calculus under your belt, and be off on your way. And that's very much the structure we're in today. Next question is looking at things that do work. What are the most successful STEM programs out there, and what makes those programs effective? So let's look at the positive side, and let's start with Chelsea.
I think that we've mentioned some of the effective measures of student engagement should be, I think, one of the key factors to determine whether or not a program is successful. That when students exit that, whatever the program may be, that they have the skills and knowledge ready for their next path, whether that's directly into a technical trade career or ready for college. We are talking about the new standards and Common Core says all kids are going to be college and career ready, but it doesn't really set forth the career path to be ready for what career. And so teachers are still left with that missing link of, okay, I need to make them college and career ready, they need to attain these skills, but I still don't know how to pair those skills with a career that the students might be interested in. So I think that effective programs also have that career element. So if kids enjoy grappling with different areas and disciplines, that they can see how that can end up being a career. We heard some statistics, if you were listening to the lunchtime speaker, about, especially for girls and underrepresented minorities, how STEM fields, not only are there more jobs available, but the salaries that they can earn are more commensurate with their non-minority peers.
Other inputs on how to do this successfully?
Well, I would just say, once again, from the out-of-school time perspective, in 4-H we have over 6 million kids in 4-H across the country, and around 2008 we were really looking at strengthening both the quality and the quantity of our programs, specifically in STEM, and that's when we realized that we're calling a lot of things STEM all across the country, and it's being done in a lot of different ways, and so that's when we came up with this designation of what is 4-H science ready, recognizing that there's these activities, but then to be a comprehensive, high-quality program, you have to meet these criteria. We put together what we call the 4-H science checklist. And, so half of that actually, since we're science education within the context of positive youth development, half of it's good positive youth development, half of it's good science education. But from the science perspective, we want our programs to be hands-on and engaging. We want them to be experiential. We want the kids to be learning from and through their own experiences with the curriculum. We want it to be inquiry-based. so that, once again, they're acting on their own curiosity. And we want the adult facilitator, we say facilitator instead of teacher, because we really want it to be an adult that's kind of serving as a co-leader alongside the young people. And that, that's it's easy to say, but it's very hard to prepare out-of-school time staff, after-school educators to be able to do that well. But that is the goal. And then, of course, we want it to be of a frequency and duration that they're actually getting a chance to master some skills. And I mean, ultimately, we would want them to be able to apply those skills into some kind of community project where they can see the relevance in the application.
Others?
I think one of the challenges is, at least from a mathematics perspective, as I listen to your descriptions, which are very exciting and very hands-on, from the math perspective, reality is there are certain skills in mathematics that kids have to know in order to be ready to take Algebra 1 and the course sequence that they go through in high school, whether that's includes calculus, pre-calculus, or they wait to take calculus when they're in college. There's a little bit of a disconnect between building those particular science processes and skills I'm sorry, I said science, I meant math, and the science that they're doing. And I think those are the things that you have to watch out for. I've actually had a good time in the exhibit hall talking to people and challenging them with that question. How are you maintaining the particular sequence of math skills and math ideas that we want to have built so kids are ready for algebra? And then how do they apply that algebra in a variety? So many kids still learn algebra from a textbook rather than an application perspective. So I think that that's one of the things that I would look for in a really successful STEM program, is to make sure, I'm a little biased, but that you're maintaining the integrity of the mathematics that the kids are learning as well.
I was going to say, I just have one really quick thing, which is very often in education, we are faced with either or choices, right? Where it was one extreme or the other. People say it's a pendulum. I say no, it's a quantum leap, because we don't ever seem to spend any time in a middle ground, which would imply some sort of balance, right? We're at one extreme or instantly at the other extreme. I think this is a case where I would very much advocate for both and rather than either or. I don't want it to be problem-based or where there's there's certain skills and things that I think we need both. But we need both in an integrated way, so that as kids are learning skills, as kids are learning concepts, they have somewhere to go with them, and they have something to do with them that means something and that matters to them. And the other piece, I think, that when I think of the successful STEM programs I've seen, whether they're little tiny things that one teacher does in their classroom, whether they're really huge things where an entire school is organized, is they're very, very collaborative. And I'm not just talking about the way that kids work together. It's the way that the kids work with the adults in the room. It's the way that those adults work with other adults in the community. That is the nature of what STEM really is it draws upon multiple disciplines and multiple perspectives, which means that not everybody is an expert in anything, but somebody in the room is an expert in something that matters. And I think that's also a necessary component that, again, values what kids bring to it.
So putting together just a little short summary of what you just shared, you have mentoring and the importance of that. You've got the examples of what success looks like to kids. Show them something or somebody or a career path that links to why this is important beyond just the objective that's right in front of them. Maintaining the integrity of the system, and then the impact of teachers in the environment. Those are 4 things that I heard in those answers. Now, here's the next question is, well, how do you monitor and measure the effectiveness of STEM education programs if it's things like that?
You don't give them a test, that's for sure. I can tell you how not to monitor it.
But I think this is a tension that certainly is present in virtually everything we do. We heard about that last night at the dinner that was hosted by U.S. News, was this notion of tremendous opportunities out there for kids, but this need to measure and monitor is it's very present, and a number of constituencies are looking for that. So how do we do this?
I don't think I have the answer, but when you hear measure and monitor in education, those words really translate to how they do on the test. And so to look at things that we're wanting kids to engage in grappling with ideas and leading to a career, those are things that are hard to test from year to year. You can't say, did this year's 7th grader do well enough to become a chemical engineer. It's a long process to look at the effectiveness. So I, again, go back to student engagement. If students are in a STEM program and they re-enroll in that program the next year, there was something effective about that program. That student engagement is there and they want to continue that path. If you have a program that's set up and kids are dropping out of it or not staying engaged in it, it's probably not meeting the mark for the learner. Chad had mentioned meeting the needs of all kids, and that after school time probably does a better job of that than in school hours, because oftentimes even though we tell kids and they hear you can be anything, they'll walk into school and doors are constantly closed for them based on one test score they got. You jokingly mentioned 5th grade, but that's the reality.
What's the reality?
And so, or using my daughter as an example, her middle school did that. They closed doors based on test scores, and you get to her high school where they happily say they have open access to AP courses and things like that. But if you've had 3 years of lack of skill attainment and an environment of success, it's really hard to walk into those upper level classes with the skills and drive and belief in yourself that you're going to be successful. So even though some campuses are doing the right thing by offering equal opportunities to all students, kids aren't taking advantage of that opportunity because they've heard the message earlier on in their life that you say it's for me, but it's really not. And I think that we're doing some great outreach as a nation in small community pockets to help underrepresented students access these programs, and we've always done a great job with our high-achieving upper echelon students, but we have this huge population in the middle that gets left out. And when we look at the need for STEM professionals in the future, we're going to need all kids to know that they can enter those careers and enter these educational programs. And so I think monitoring and measuring the success of those programs needs to be by the number of students that you're allowing. Lots of times we say we have this great program on campus, but only 50 kids can take it. We only have room for 50 kids. Well, if 500 are interested, we need to find a way to let 500 kids in.
Linda has a few slides to share that look at how STEM education can complement the Common Core standards or next generation science standards. So if you'd like to do that, if you call for the slide to change, it'll magically happen. There you go.
All right, there it is. So if you're not familiar with the standards for mathematical practice, these are in the Common Core. And if you look at each grade level content standards, you will see on the front part of it, on the front first page of it up in the corner, the standards for mathematical practice. A lot of us refer to these as the mathematical habits of mind that we want kids to have. So whether they're kindergartners first looking at math and exploring number, or whether they're high school kids doing something in a project in geometry or calculus, that throughout the whole spread of K through 12, even pre-K through 12, that these are the habits of mind we want kids to have. And if you'll go to the next slide, whoever's doing that wonderful stuff, these are the science and engineering practices from the next generation science standards, which if you look at them, you see some similarities. So in the spirit of always trying to align, if you'll go to the next slide, not a perfect alignment, because I think there are a lot of ways they cross, but I tried to come up with a way to take those mathematical practices and align them with those science and engineering practices. And I think that although in some cases they fit in more than one place, this to me is part of the secret of STEM, is if we can get kids involved in these habits of mind early on, certainly in middle school. By middle school they ought to be pretty good with these, but early on, that those are the kinds of things we should be watching for in kids. I mean, skills are one thing, but these are the kinds of things that, this is the way I, as a person in a big company who was hiring someone, these are the kind of habits I would want them to have. These are the kinds of things I would want them to bring to the table. And I was just absolutely amazed at the alignment between what we're really asking kids to do in mathematics and what we're asking them to do with science and engineering practices. And so much of this not only revolves around engagement, but it also revolves around creative thinking and that notion Peg mentioned about, so you might goof it up the first 5 times you try it, but then on the 6th time you just might hit something that nobody ever thought about before. And this invites kids to get engaged, I think. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you because I think it's a pretty visual way to see the connections that are so apparently there between science and mathematics and engineering. Engineering, I was on another panel and was a little overwhelmed by the lady sitting next to me because she was from a National Engineering Society and I'm glowed. She made a very insightful comment early on. Engineering in the primary grades doesn't mean we want kids designing roads and freeways and buildings. It means we want kids to be problem solvers. And I looked at her and said, that's just what we want kids to do in mathematics. So I think that that's part of the key of linking all this. And it certainly supports the Common Core in mathematics, and it certainly supports the next generation science standards.
Reactions from our other panelists?
I think the other piece of it for any of you in the audience who may not be directly involved as educators is that if you are in any way, shape, or form a STEM disciplinarian, this is the way you work as a disciplinarian. These are not something that we've invented to give to kids K-12, which only serves them while they are in school. This is the way mathematicians work. This is the way scientists work. This is the way engineers and anybody who's in a design field thinks about and approaches their work, and then by extension, their world. And if we really want kids to become proficient in STEM, then we need to get them to so that they think in these ways. And so it really does connect not only across the disciplines K-12, but I would say, you know, beyond school, not just the after school while they're at that age group, but across the disciplines and into the actual work of being a disciplinarian. And we have not seen that. Certainly in mathematics, there has been a big disconnect for a long time between school mathematics and what doing math in school looks like, which kids, they know, right? This is stuff that's 1,000 years old, and every question that they get is somebody has already solved this. Why am I solving something that's already been solved? This isn't really a problem, is it? Right? So if we can get them to start to look at and think about the discipline in the way that somebody who actually engages with it because they love it and they do it for fun, if not for money or some of each, as opposed to because they have to, that's where we want kids going. So I see real power in these practices, and the fact that they're actually articulated in the standards, not as prose, not as a preamble. These are inherent, they are the core, they are the heart of what drives this work.
Chelsea?
Just to bring in the other Common Core state standards for English and language arts, I feel in my years in education, it's the first time where writing in the disciplines of science and social sciences is actually called out in the standards, so that students, when they are engaged in reading and writing activities in the areas of science and nonfiction content, are working towards what a real scientist might do, publish a journal entry or share their data in a non-traditional format, so to take their observations that they really took themselves through a lab and to recreate it into some sort of formal publication that real scientists would do. So it kind of bridges that gap between what Peg just mentioned about schoolwork and real work of the scientists in fields today.
That's great, Chad.
I was just going to add that it's nice for us that, as Peg said, that they are so clearly defined, both the science and engineering practices, but also since so much of what we do is around engineering, robotics, and aerospace and all that, it's nice to see that the engineering design process is on par with scientific inquiry. And then back to your other point, I think there's also a push here, obviously, to integrate the practices and the content knowledge. So that you're not, you know, we're going to spend some time doing this, and we're going to spend, but they're together, and that they're being done together. And we might not cover as much content knowledge, but we're going to do it in a way that you go deeper and you get a better sense of how scientists and engineers think and act and behave.
Well, I think that's useful. A very, very good discussion. And Linda, thank you for the work you did on those slides. For those in the audience that might want them, I'm sure there's a way that we can make them available through our hosts, if you didn't have a chance to snap a picture of it. I'll do one more question, then we're going to go to you for questions, and assuming there's enough energy, we'll continue down that path, and if not, we'll go back to the discussion that we've mapped out. So this next question focuses on the teachers, and really, what are some of the biggest challenges that teachers face in driving student interest in STEM today, and what types of resources do schools need to provide to teachers to help them succeed? So from both of those perspectives. And Linda, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think first of all, we have to take the burden of coverage of material off the table. And I say that, I don't say that lightly. I know that there are certain things that kids need to learn. I think we can do a better job of teaching those in a variety of ways. But I think that this notion of the teachers that I currently work with back at home are very worried because in our state, 60% of their evaluation is going to be based on how kids do on tests. That's not healthy for the teachers, that's not healthy for the students, and I think we need to take some of that away and give teachers some freedom and opportunities to be creative in what they do. At the same time, accountability is important. So I think teachers need support. I think teachers need professional development. Yesterday in our opening session, it was yesterday, where we talked about supporting undergraduate students. Teachers need that kind of support. They need to be collaborative in their environments. They need to be able to work together. Administrators need to understand that what we once called integration, we're now, to some extent, we're now calling STEM, where we looked to integrate various subject areas. That's not easy to do. It takes time to do it. It takes creativity to do it. And teachers need to be given that time and opportunities to be collaborative and do that kind of work together. You can go into the exhibit hall, and there's a lot of stuff already done there, but I think some of the richest opportunities are when teachers get an idea and they go with it. So time, money is always a good thing. If you have any extra, let me know. Because even for our center, it's really difficult to get the kind of funding we need, not only for materials, but also to pay teachers for this kind of work. Many of them wouldn't necessarily want to be paid, but you wouldn't expect to do that as a doctor and not get paid, compensated in some sort of way for your time. So I think that's it.
Others?
I would just add, after-school educators don't necessarily have a STEM background, so for them, it's a comfort level issue, and we have to work with them to kind of strip away that fear. I mean, it's just the nature of the business. In some situations, schools are employing teachers in the after-school hours, but in a lot of cases, you have very entry-level positions. And there's, it's been shown that entry-level frontline after-school workers can successfully engage kids in STEM activities, but it's a lot of, like I said, stripping away that fear, making them realize that if you're learning alongside the kids and your job is to facilitate the project-based learning, then I just always go back to, we had an NSF-funded project a few years ago, and we had after-school trainers who were comfortable with the training component and had done a lot of training, but not necessarily in STEM. And they were so nervous when they came to the first workshop. It was a 3-year project, intensive professional development for 3 years, multiple times a year, multi-day institutes each time. And after the first workshop, they just were relieved because they realized that the focus is on the process of doing science and on the engineering process. They don't have to have all the vocabulary. And actually, we encourage kids to come up with their own words. The main thing is that they're able to communicate their science to each other, and that they're able to learn from each other what's working and what's not working, and then incorporate that to get better and to go back and redo their design and move it forward. So that's, that's a big part of what we try to do, is building confidence in the out-of-school time world that they can successfully facilitate these activities.
Can I ask you a question? Sure. Based on that? I think about all the informal science opportunities we have in the area in which I live. We have an incredible museum network, we've got an incredible zoo, we've got a wonderful science center, we even have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I think sometimes teachers miss opportunities to collaborate with those scientists, as Peg has mentioned, and really think about using those as community resources within their own classroom. Is that something, and then I know 4-H is a little different because it's a formal after-school program, but is that something that we can do a better job with?
Oh, I think so. And there's a lot of work being done right now to figure out how to better integrate informal and formal education and how to get them to partner and share resources.
Justin?
Going back to the question about supporting teachers, I think that Linda mentioned a lot of things about collaborative time to plan, and also providing teachers with quality curriculum. Oftentimes when there's new sets of standards, teachers feel like they have to recreate and start from scratch. And really it's looking at what are you currently doing that is working, and keep doing that. And what might not be working and doesn't fit with the new standards, and let's give ourselves permission to get rid of that. Where oftentimes that fear we talked about with student success early on and why students give up, also we're all humans, and so teachers have that same sense of failure. And it's our own failure because we feel we've failed the kids. And so by providing teachers the time to collaborate, let them know that, hey, if you try something new and innovative and it doesn't work, that doesn't mean it's not okay to try something else. And so to keep working, I think we're also sometimes looking for the quick fix. You know, it's kids' futures at stake. We have to have an immediate answer now that works and is good, and then everybody can use it. And unfortunately, room of educators and professionals, there's not a magic answer. I think it's the working collaboratively and looking at the cross-disciplinary nature of STEM that's going to allow students to be successful and also give teachers the confidence to try new things. I think that looking at progressive companies, there's tons of them here in the exhibit hall that offer innovative approaches to reach all students. And again, I just bring up that career connection. For teachers, I think that's oftentimes we are educated in education, and we might meet some professionals that are engaged in the real work throughout the day that we're trying to instill in students in the classroom, but to bring in that career awareness for the teachers, because oftentimes the teachers know they need to make career connections, but they're not quite sure how what we're teaching in the classroom connects to careers. STEM careers especially, there's new ones being created every day. So to keep up on that, and on top of keeping up on new curriculum and new standards, is a lot of burden to place on teachers. So if partners, again, like mentioned here at this conference, can help teachers make those connections for students to careers and opportunities for students.
Sure.
And two things in particular came to my mind when I was thinking about, okay, what, if I could narrow it down, what do I think schools could do? The first thing I think is time, and it's not just the sort of time that Chelsea was just referring to about collaboration. It's the fact that in your classroom, when something doesn't go right, that you don't feel like, oh my gosh, I've got to speed up now because I need to get to X, Y, Z, whatever that is. Because I think that teachers very often feel that pressure, which means that they place that pressure on students, and they get in their own way of, you know, letting kids explore even when they mean to do things really well. Again, specific to mathematics, but I'm pretty sure that this applies across all of the STEM disciplines. There is a real problem in our country right now with instruction, where even when we're doing very, very rich work, we feel the pressure of time in classrooms, and so we rescue kids. We take the hard parts. It's double, right? It's not just the time aspect, it's also this notion that my job as the teacher is to take care of my students. Well, taking care of students sometimes means letting them fall on their face and then helping them to get back up and realize, you can walk that off, can't you? You're better for it. We don't let kids fall on their face because we think our job somehow is to make it easy for them. So we step in and rescue them way too quickly. Our job shouldn't be to make it easy for kids, it should be to make it interesting for kids and to make it productive for kids. And sometimes that does mean actually setting up opportunities for them to fall on their face. Again, the notion of letting them know that that's why it works this way, not just, you know, they fall on their face and then we tell them afterwards. The other component, which we haven't really touched on when I think about something schools could do, is schools, because frankly it shouldn't just be the individual teacher, but schools systemically and teachers as part of that ought to be getting better about how we talk with parents around this work. When parents say to me, I don't know how to help my kid with their homework because, you know, I didn't get this far or whatever it is, or I didn't understand, or I'm not a math person, I failed algebra 3 times, and then they laugh, and you know, so I've already told him that I expect him to fail twice. Anyway, yeah, exactly. Moment for everybody in the room, because I'm sure many of you have heard similar things. But for us to be able to talk to parents and get them to understand that the most important thing they can do is be an audience for their kid, we don't need more teachers at home. We need somebody who is a receptor for their students' learning, because the most productive thing you can do is to force the kid to be the teacher and for the student to actually articulate. We don't need more opportunity for our students to be passive, right? If we're up here advocating for very active learning, hands-on, minds-on kind of learning, we don't want them to go home and fall into a passive role while they sit there and watch their parents do their homework, or their older brother or their cousin, or whoever it is they Googled, because there's, you know, 30 gazillion online places they can get their homework done as well for free. We also need to let parents understand that the reason that it looks different is because the world is different. And our role as educators is to prepare their kids for that future, not our past, and not their parents' past either. And I think for us to help parents get comfortable with that, these are their kids, they're scared, they're worried, they ought to be worried, right? I'm sure all of us that have children, we're worried on behalf of our kids. So I think having that conversation and helping us to get better in that conversation.
I don't know about you in the room, but I certainly feel a little worried just listening to the intensity of that answer. And it reminded me especially that falling down and dusting yourself off, getting back up sounded just like Sister Mary Anthony, who was my third grade teacher. She basically said the same thing. So with that, I was having flashbacks. We'll turn to the audience and start with questions from you.
Thank you for all your comments. I'm a mathematician, big supporter of NCTM, and appreciate your comment. I don't think this is on, is it? Maybe it's not. No, it's on. I can talk loud. I can use my teacher voice. Is this on? Yeah, it is. I actually have a question for the audience, if that's okay. How many of you in here are K-12 teachers? How many of you in here are either a principal, a superintendent, or a director of curriculum instruction for a school district? That is awesome. I didn't anticipate that many hands to come up. And I
better round of applause for all of you.
One of the most significant professional development programs that I ran in Minnesota with high school math teachers involved starting that whole 3-year cycle of the professional development with a workshop where it was required that the principals of the schools, and we even got somebody from the superintendent's office to come and sit down with us and talk about the goals, talk about this mucking around in the classroom that we were going to engage teachers in so they could bring it back to their classrooms. Without that, previous programs were not as successful in sustaining what was going on, getting that mucking around and creativity, because it was looked at like, what are you doing? You need to meet these standards, you got these tests to do, you have to do this. So I want to encourage everybody who's here, and in particular the panel, conferences like this should be loaded with those principals, with those administrative levers, even the state folks, who can be encouraged to sit down at the table with the teachers and work together. I mean, when you're in a district where we're continuing to have contract negotiations for the teachers, ongoing, and the teachers have to work to rule, meaning they're there when the school day starts, they have to leave the building when it ends, it makes it really hard to collaborate, to do all of this. And that support from the administration is a big key to making this whole initiative successful.
Thank you for the perspective. So how about administrators, which I'll just take that as distilling as the point of the comment. Well, how about the role of administrators, not just teachers?
After 28 years in the classroom, I had experiences with a variety of administrators. And the administrators who got it, who getting involved in knowing what was going on in their school, could be real instructional leaders. It wasn't just 5 minutes in the classroom to do the quick walkthrough and check off whatever was on their Palm Pilot. Those were my favorite jobs. Those were the best schools I ever taught in. And where the administrators didn't get it, and there wasn't much way of convincing them, those were my hardest years of teaching. So getting administrators to come to NCTM meetings, this year we actually spoke at we were invited to attend the National Association of Secondary School Principals meeting, and we will have someone speaking at the elementary school principals meeting, because that conversation, an administrator makes or breaks a building. You can have awesome teachers, but that administrator makes or breaks a building. So those of you in administration, your work I think is every bit as important in supporting the teachers and knowing what's going on in your schools.
Chelsea?
I was just going to say, as a true instructional leader, which hopefully the administration in the room are just by being here today, it's oftentimes, again, coming from a place of uncomfortableness from the fact that most schools are a gathering of experts, when you look in the secondary schools, of their own field. And if you become an administrator, you might have a great English language arts background, a great biology background, or a great math background, or even maybe it was a fine arts background, and suddenly you're in charge of all curriculum and instruction, all subjects across multiple grade levels, and it can be a daunting job. So I think that the leaders that are the most successful in that role are ones that want to learn alongside by the teachers and aren't afraid to put themselves out there as, you know what, the teachers in my campus might know more about something than I do. And when they take that humanistic approach to leadership, I think that the campuses really thrive. And teachers and administrators are the ones, kids pick up on the pulse of the school. If the teachers and administrators aren't happy, the kids know that, and they're not engaged in learning. And when they feel the teachers like to be around each other and that the principal does care about their teachers and students, kids pick up on that and thrive in those environments.
Okay.
I was just going to say that the role of an instructional leader has so many different component parts to it, and from my perspective in the classroom, one of those for me as a classroom teacher who was the crazy person out on the fringe of campus, thankfully my room was the farthest from the main office, so parents couldn't get to me as easily. The fact that the administrators had my back for the most part was huge, because it allowed me to be brave. It allowed me to do things with my students who, you know, that really did get them excited and get them doing things that maybe they otherwise wouldn't. And I just recently heard from a student I hadn't heard from in 12 years saying, "You may not remember me, but I entered your classroom gladly proclaiming how much I hated mathematics," and I do remember her because her entire notebook had things about how math sucked. That's the technical term for it in middle school. She is just now finishing some sort of triple hyphenate engineering degree at UCLA and said it was because of my work. But my work was because I had administrators who were between me and a lot of pressures that came from my district. I mean, I worked in LA Unified. We had a lot of pressures that came down on us. And if my administrators had let all of that land on my head, I don't know that I could have been the teacher I was in that room for that kid.
That was a great perspective, obviously lit up the panel in a very good way. Another question here.
I'm Mark Frautschi. I'm a physicist by training, and I've been interested in the issue of women and the mathematically intensive field since 1974, writing a book on that. And so I come here, like many people, thinking I have a piece of the solution. And then I listen to this wonderful panel and I go, oh my God, I'm the problem. I just wanted to...
Just change the title.
Exactly. So I just wanted to react to something that you, Hegel, said, if I'm getting your name right, which was about being mucky with mathematics. And it seems to me that part of the education process around math is to provide some sort of a glide path so that students can find their way to have a powerful relationship with rigor, where there is one right answer, so to speak. If you prove a theorem, it's true in all universes for all of time. And I get it about, you know, making mistakes and failing and this stuff with failing with video games. And so I wanted to know how you manage that tension. You know, the tension between the mucky stuff and the rigor that seems to me is at the heart of the math.
So probably it's because my perspective on rigor is other than purely axiomatic. And I actually did a series, rigor was very big in California, LAUSC I should say. I mean, we heard about this all the time. So for 3 years at our state conference, my talk was actually entitled Algebra 1, Rigor Without Rigor Mortis. So that gives you a sense of my perspective on rigor. I think it really does, you know, yeah, I want kids to eventually get to that perspective, but I want them to get there because they look at math as, number one, rich. They look at it as beautiful. They look at it as connected. I can't tell you how many students will walk into a geometry class and say, my God, thank God I got to geometry because I hate algebra. It's like, you guys know this is the same stuff, except instead of being in a numeric, it's now in a They don't. They've got no clue, right? And the kid who walks in and goes, oh, I'm going to do really badly in geometry because last year I did really well in algebra, and I've heard there's algebra people and there's geometry people, and I'm an algebra person. They have no clue that math is one thing, and there's many, many different pieces of it or slices of it or perspectives on it. So I want them to have that big global view before we start getting into the how do we do proof and the fact that, and I would even argue that, you know, there's more than one way to get to proof.
Sure.
You know, I'm sure that Fermat did not write in the margin, or didn't write in the margin, but I'm sure his proof was not exactly what Andrew Wiles eventually landed on. So there are many, many directions, many, many ways to go, even when there is a single answer. And there are many, many really wonderful questions, certainly when we get out into the applied world in mathematics, for which there isn't necessarily a single answer, or it's very contextually driven. So I want kids to also understand that. And the fact that, you can say, well, this is the answer, most of the time.
So I want to address that from an elementary perspective, because Peg was talking more about upper middle school and high school. And I used to do some what I would consider non-routine problems with my students. I was really lucky because I taught only math. Other people said, don't you miss teaching the other stuff? And I said, not for a second. So I would go home and actually look for these, what we might even call creative thinking tasks, but tasks where I would give them to the rich tasks is how we refer to them now, where I would give them to the kids and they would just look at me and go, I don't get what they want us to do. And my first question was always, who are they? I mean, these kids have this notion of there's somebody up in heaven or someplace that writes these awful things. And again, at first I wanted to support them and show them how to do it, and then I finally decided I'm not serving them at all, so let them go and give them some time to really mess around with them. That's what I mean about messing around with math. It's not quite as physical as messing around with science. But giving them, trying different ways. And I remember the handshake problem. How many of you are familiar with the handshake problem? So it goes something like there are a certain number of people at a party and everybody shakes hands with everybody else one time. How many handshakes will there be? Well, it was always based on the number of kids in the class. So if I had 25 kids in one class and 28 kids in another, of course the answer was different. And the kids would come up to me after they had solved the problem and say, did I get the right answer? And I'd go, I don't know what the answer is. They go, how could you give us a problem and not know what the answer is? My response to that was always, but I know how to find the answer. I know the thinking that goes into finding the answer. So the answer isn't important based on your class or the next class. No matter how many kids I can figure out the answer if you tell me there's 100 people in the class. So it's not that the answer isn't important, but I think 10 years from now, who cares how many handshakes there were, but the kids will remember the process that they used to get to that answer. And if that process comes up in another problem, my fifth graders used to say to me, that's like the handshake problem. So they started to generalize how they could use that in different capacities. That's the kind of rich thinking that you want them to do in science, we want them to do in math, where it's that process that they use to get to the answer. At least in most of school math, nobody really cares. I'm saying that somewhat facetiously, but it's the thinking that the kids are learning in order to get to that solution that is every bit as important as the solution in my mind. We got in a lot, by the way, NCTM got in a lot of trouble about 25 years ago by saying the answer's not important. So I'm not saying the answer's not important. But, well, we had a lot of pushback. I won't say we got in a lot of trouble. But I just want to emphasize, and I wanted my students to understand that it was a thinking process that was so much more important than how many handshakes there were going to be a part of.
Chad, how about from the after-school perspective, this tension between the rigor of science or math and the fun of just using the concepts?
Well, I don't know if we have that much tension. I think we have different pressures, I've heard all of the pressures, and I taught for 5 years, so I understand a little bit about the pressures, but I taught ag science, and so, it was a different kind of teaching. I mean, I was set up for that. I had a greenhouse. I had 40 acres that we farmed. We were about the active type of learning. So, our learning that I'm familiar with has always been focused on that engaging. It can be fun, but you're also learning something. And once again, I've never had the pressure that some of the formal ed people have been experiencing. And I think it's growing.
Chelsea?
We can go to the next question.
Next question.
My name is Keith Moore from Open Up TV, and this is a healthy conversation or question. To the teachers, I really think you all are almost like veterans. You obviously salute you for the work that you do. Chelsea had mentioned earlier about covering outreach with the minority community in particular, and I was concerned about that broad statement and like to drill down a little bit on the effectiveness of really where we are in that as well. When I think about that kind of subject, I think about remedial education, and we're talking about math. The crises in urban America, probably beyond urban America, with just basic reading, is so off the charts. It scares me when I think about, for example, the White House having a CSK 10,000 where we need 10,000 computer science teachers in 100,000 schools by next year. So between that and your resource issue, which I know that most challenging, financially, you don't get paid enough, you can't buy erasers and pencils. If you could, each one of you, maybe drill down a little bit on those realities that I see behind the camera, if you will. I think that would be a good discussion.
Trustee Clifford.
So I feel that a lot of you mentioned that there's this need for more computer science teachers and therefore more computer scientists, but also in the education area right now there are opportunities for students. And again, definitely not enough of them. So I think drilling down and finding how can we provide more opportunities is even better. But there are companies that are taking it as their mission to support students that aren't being supported other places. Again, I mentioned sometimes there's 50 students that might get to be involved in an internship program. And I can speak specifically in the San Diego area. There are certain high school campuses and middle school campuses where students can be involved in avid programs if there are no college graduates in their family, and if they're a student of ethnic diversity, or there's programs that cater just to girls and things like that, that are very specified programs of how you can qualify to be a part of them. And they kind of are, like the lunchtime speaker talking about, that mentorship is so important. And those students then have, if they don't, I think it was Chad that mentioned it earlier, if they don't have that champion parent at home telling them you can be anything you want to be, their mentor or the program that they become involved in fills that void for them, and they are given that support through the system that students are expected to navigate and graduate ready for their future. And so I think more of those programs, and make sure that they're available at all schools. Lots of times it might be a small charter school that has a niche that they fill for students and student need and mentorship. But a lot of our large urban comprehensive traditional high schools that we think of and middle schools don't have enough community support coming to the schools. If community members, right, in the fields, there was a study about girls enrolling in AP courses, and even from affluent areas, if girls did not see scientists in the field, they did not enroll in AP science classes in high school because the role model and what's flashed in front of them in the media is counterproductive to everything we say at home and school to them, and they seem to, I guess it's developmentally appropriate for them to listen to those messages instead of those of us in the know say to them. Hollywood seems to be a much more bigger influence. So I think that getting some partners that students will listen to their voices is going to be an important thing to fill that void. But I don't know that I have the solution, but I do agree with you that the need is there, and I think that this big connection here at STEM Solutions between business and education is a great start in filling that void and providing mentors in the field that students can feel they belong. And I think seeing role models that are like themselves. And if you look in a mirror and you don't feel you can see your own image, you're not going to want to go into that field.
Other perspectives?
Yeah, I come from a bit of a different background now that I'm at the university, and my role at the university, one of the nice things is I'm not a faculty member, so when I do something wrong, they just look at me and go, what does she know? But at the same time, we've had a lot of opportunities to work with teachers, particularly in Cleveland, a large urban district. And in working with teachers, we've also worked with trying to develop programs where we bring particularly upper elementary and lower middle school kids onto campus. Many of these kids don't have anyone in their family that has ever gone to college. And we have them actually work together with the undergrads so they can get an idea of what being on a college campus looks like, whether they're going to go into a STEM-related field or not, that there are scholarship. We actually bring in parents sometimes so they can understand that there are scholarship opportunities for a lot of these kids. And so we've got the kids understanding and hearing from, we might consider peers at our age, but actually they're older, they're undergraduate students, that yes, you can do this, you can go to college, college is really cool, and at the same time letting their parents know that there are avenues that their kids actually can go to college. So I think even earlier than what you're talking about, just letting kids know that these options are open to them and informing their parents about how, parents will say, well, I can't afford to send my kid to college. Well, there are a lot of opportunities for you to get scholarships, for you to get grant money, so that it doesn't become something that just can't be in the vision of my kid.
Jeff, anything to contribute?
No, I mean, I agree. A lot of our programs, we specifically target first generation, within the family to go to college. We target girls, we target, different races that are underrepresented in STEM fields and majors. We have a program where we get kids onto Rutgers campus from the urban centers throughout New Jersey. We're talking Trenton, Camden, Atlantic City, places like that. And get them on campus and interacting with the STEM faculty and the grad students and the undergrads, and let them know about all the opportunities, and then we work with those after they do that summer experience, and they stay with us through high school, and we're meeting with them throughout the year to help prepare them for that opportunity that they'll have. So a lot of our after-school programs target those populations as well, and to try to provide that support where we believe it's needed the most. And it goes back to not having the mentors in their community, not having the mentors in their family or their neighborhood or their community at large. And then, Chelsea's point about mentors is also well taken. We just finished a program April 12th where we had 6 series of Science Saturdays. We had one corporation that we were working with for 50 4th to 7th grade African American and Latino kids from the city of Trenton. Those kids came every Saturday morning from 9 to noon to do science with us. And, we weren't short. We weren't short, right? We start with 50. There's a lot of enthusiasm in the beginning. We had 50 at the end. And the neat thing is we had 30 corporate volunteers for the 50 kids. So the ratio was terrific. And then just the way that they were able to break out and work, and they presented their little science fair projects that they did on the last day just a couple weeks ago. So it's just neat for them to have that opportunity to interact with people that otherwise they wouldn't have that chance.
Well, we're approaching the end of our time, and I have a lightning round that we're going to go through here to close our time. And it has to do with parents, because we've spent a little bit of time on parents, but not a lot. Parents, they're the ones that bring their kids to the schools. They're the ones that vote. They're the ones that pay. They also complain, and I hear from time to time they'll also praise when things are done right. So here's the question for each of you. You have 30 seconds of instruction or guidance to parents about their role in STEM success. What would that be? And Peg, you get to go first. 30 seconds.
I volunteered quickly before somebody else thought of it. Ask, don't tell, which actually was a motto in my classroom. I had it printed out really huge in the front of the room. It's something my students were expected to do of each other. It's something I told my parents was the most important thing they could do with their kids. Ask questions. If what we're trying to do is to develop thinkers, then you don't do that by telling somebody what you think. You do that by helping them to learn to think.
Very good. Chelsea?
I think what parents can do is actually giving them advice of something that they shouldn't do, and that is to tell their kids, it's okay, I wasn't good in math either, oh, it's fine, science is hard. Our country used to be a place where it was okay to say you couldn't read and write, and luckily over generations, that's no longer an acceptable statement to say in America. And it should also not be an acceptable statement to say I'm not good in science or math, or I can't do science and math. We need to, if STEM education is really going to move where it needs to go, we need parents champion for their kids at home, give them a pat on the back. I know it's hard, you're going to persevere. Remember when you couldn't pronounce those words, we read it together, we did it together, come on, we'll figure this out, and be there to support them rather than think they're supporting by saying it's okay, I can't do it either.
So we have ask, don't tell, champion. Linda?
So what they said? Also, one of the really practical things that we did was we would have a Math for Parents night, and the kids would come with their parents. At one of the schools I taught at, it was a pretty affluent neighborhood, so we had a lot of parents and kids. When I taught in a not-so-affluent district, it was hard to get parents to come, so we got the local grocery store to donate food, and we made spaghetti dinners, and boy, they piled in for dinner that night. And we would actually do some things where the kids were showing the parents what they were learning, and parents could ask questions. It got parents much more involved, and these were, for lack of a better term, interesting kinds of things they were doing, just not how do you add, subtract, multiply, and divide numbers, but the parents could actually, kids would give parents, they would play games with them, or they would give them problems to solve that they had worked on. And so it got parents to really see what we were trying to do, have opportunities to ask questions, but also learn together with their kids.
So we're going to call that food plus role reversal. Now we go to Chad.
Take your kid to the science center, take them to the museum, the library, take your kids to the zoo, go on a nature trail walk. And you know, when your kids are asking you 101 questions and you feel like you don't have the time and patience for it, reconsider that and really try to nurture their curiosity.
So nurturing in the real world. So with that, let's thank our panelists for an outstanding discussion.